Welcome everybody to the Grim Verdict podcast. As always, I am Verdict, and over here we have my dear friend, co-host Grimmkill. What's up, dude?
What up?
And today we're tackling a topic which is, of course, we're still following the continuation of the quote-unquote canonical time-by-time events. Bear in mind, BDO is not really done good in terms of timeline. You never know what happened at what particular time because different nations use different calendars, essentially, and it's very hard, basically, what I'm trying to say. But we still follow this order. But before we go into today's episode, which, Grim, I think we should do a parental advisory for this, actually. You know that?
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
It's pretty dark. And we're not kidding. We're not kidding, or we're going to spoil just ahead what's coming through. But of course, obviously, the title of this video is going to be The Ancient Empire of Orzeka. And see, when we talk about parental advisory, today we're going to talk about some topics which are very sensitive, which includes kids. And, Orzeka is basically the horror story of BDO in the most insane way told. So yeah, just a quick disclaimer for everybody, because there will be some very bad descriptions. So yeah, you've been warned. But before this, Grim, we did something. We did something. We want to build this community. I think that we're doing a good job, and people are showing so much love for the podcast, like me and you just rambling about lore. What did we do, Grim?
We did a thing. We made a Discord.
What's the thing? A Discord? Jesus Christ, where can I find it?
Below in the links.
Indeed. You guys can join the Grim Verdict Discord where we talk about lore. Basically, we still haven't, honestly. We just made it, so we're kind of just now putting it out onto the 4th episode. So you guys can, jump down below, check the link, make sure you join in. There is no link still, unfortunately, because YouTube is just weird. Despite the fact that this is my 75th channel on YouTube, they still need me to build reputation with it before we can do link. But you can still copy just the numbers or whatever it is with the letters, so you can still join freely and easily. But Grim, we gotta go into this, man, and I'm scared.
Oh, dude.
It's crazy how, when we talk about BDO lore, nobody thinks of it as horror. And me and you, we know it's grim dark, but everybody else doesn't know why it's grim dark.
Well, they're about to know.
They're about to know. They are about to know. And that's the thing about Orzeka, is that it is such a contrast compared to what you get into the main quest chain. Main quest chain, there's some evilness to it. This one guy resurrecting this other dude against his wish and stuff like that, and death. But that's nothing. That pales into comparison to, flaying children alive for a god.
Yep.
just to be as descriptive as possible. But Orzeka is, and Grim, you've been recently tapping into Warhammer 40k. We're gonna do some references here. See,
oh, okay.
In 40k, there is this particular chapter which is known as the Night Lords. And the Night Lords are all about conquering through terror, conquering through fear, and ruling through fear. The entirety of the idea is, with the very least amount of casualties, to bring forth compliance with the roughest penalties known to mankind. So that particular chapter, and I'm sorry to go a little bit too much side note here, but just so you understand Orzeka, everybody, because I have to set up here an example. The people that like the Night Lords in 40k, whether it's on tabletop, they like it for gameplay purposes, but nobody truly liked the Night Lords because of what they do, right? So the same way kind of goes with Orzeka. People don't like Orzeka because of what it does. People like it because of how much of a stark contrast it is with the world, and how insane it was. And also, it's nothing but a myth which the world proves to you over and over again. So today we're going to get into those little bits of knowledge. So, the Empire of Orzeka. Dude, what do you know of Orzeka aside of my videos? Like, what do you know outside of, it being just the most horrible place ever known to BDO in general in the world? Like, anything else that comes across?
I think the majority of my knowledge is from the videos, I'm going to be honest.
All right. What is the, of course, without spoiling, the big red guy that is going to spawn there underneath a tree? We know who we're talking about. But outside of that, do you know particularly what were the ancient times? Basically, do you know which races partook in Orzeka, for an example?
I don't actually know.
You don't know. Well, of course you don't know, Grim, because that's lore from 1 week ago. So I kind of basically did a thing over there. But 1 week ago, PA released a quest, which was called something neat. Yeah, I'm not sure why they call the quest like that, but it's something neat.
Oh, I know this one. Okay.
Exactly, yes. And recently, we actually got a confirmation over the Orzecan structure and in reality how big the empire was. And not just this, we know for a fact that all races in the world, with the exception of one race, was toppled over the kingdom. And that one race is actually the merfolk, which is a brand new thing. We don't know anything about them aside of the fact that Corsair's mother basically is a merfolk of sense, right? So we're going to explore this into the future, into the demon lands, definitely. But that little hint there, PA love doing this. They're going to just drop casually the most groundbreaking piece of lore, which rearranges all knowledge in the most simple quest, which nobody notices. And now you got to go find it. And I kind of love it. But Orzeka's lore, Grim, starts with a song, actually. And this is very important, yes. And it's called the Song of Tuna. See, Tuna is the very beginning of knowledge as we have it, because we know for a fact that Orzeca happened after Adoraxian, and people are going to have questions. What is the difference between Orzeka and Orzekea, which is a very good question. Why is the last boss in Orzekea called Ors? Very good questions, and we're going to explain all of them today. But Orzeka happened basically after Adoraxian at some particular point in time. We do not know when exactly. Some people theorize perhaps 6,000 years ago, and what led to Orzeka is a very important piece of knowledge known as the Song of Tuna, which is still a myth in its reality. We don't know if this thing ever happened, but it is more ancient, if that is true, than Adoraxian. It's longer ago than Sage, if this is to be believed. But the description in this lore knowledge goes as following, Grim, and it says the following. O small poor little girl who first stepped onto the forgotten lands in a world sought by none. I came by following the trail of tears that pierced through the fog centered around the beginning and the end of this forgotten land. Your hands must have hurt you so, tangled in the vines of thorns. Did you know that the sprouts of dried thornwood have appeared on the path you've walked on? Dear child, even your bloodless lips remain unscathed from the thorns, so let your sorrow and tears as you wish. This is the very first point and touch with the Orzecan origin, because everybody right now listening, wait, Thornwood girl, everybody knows, the Thornwood goddess.
Yes.
It is the Thornwood goddess. But we got to finish this particular song because it goes a little bit more. And Tuna, and the song goes as such, touched by the sincere words of comfort that reached her heart, the Thornwood girl broke out in tears as the Thornwood itself sprout, transcending time, growing through and chasing away the once eternal fog of the arid land. Dear child, you have a mysterious gift to create all things. This land, the world has forgotten, seems to need you more than I. I shall resign from my place as a god, protecting these lands to become a thick forest, to embrace your arid thorns, so cry no more. My large hooves shall work the land, my loud cry shall part this fog, and I shall grind my horns to light up a flame for your protection. So you shall welcome those who find these lands as the Thornwood goddess henceforth. Share your heart from the depths of your heart and sing of knowledge and birth. I shall become a thick forest for you, light a flame to protect you, so kindle a brand new future with those who come seeking these lands. This is Orzeka's origin. in reality, this is their mythos. This is the beginning of it all for them, all with this particular song. Now, Tunta is the god of the Turos, and we spoke about this in our first episode, which is basically, he is kind of the most ancient god we know of our world that actually has something to them. You know, we spoke about in the past of Banha perhaps being a god, you know, the three dragons, Avelion, of all, but never have we had something that is of close proximity as such, right? So Tunta is the god of the Turos, and the Turos are actually sentient, intelligent creatures. They're not just some sort of bulls, wildlings, etc. No, they just live in a tribal manner, in a sense. So the Song of Tunta begins, and this is the origin point of Orzeka. Now we got to talk a little bit about Adoraxian, because it is super important. See, before Adoraxian Orzeca's release, we had no idea whether or not the Thornwood Goddess was actually a real thing, whether or not, you know, the elves were around in our world, which was a very big hole, which didn't make any sense. And Orzeka in Adoraxian is going to tell us so much about Orzeka and how it became Orzeka. The same thing goes for Yolunakia. See, let's do some world building, because that's, in my opinion, the most important bit. Orzeka and Yolunakia are two regions, kind of, you could call them kingdoms or places in general, you know, like territorial zones in a sense. And those two were separate in one right after the other. So Yolunakia was where the Olun's Valley was, all the way upwards towards perhaps the Camasilvian vicinity, and Orzeka was down below. One of those particular zones was known as a very cheerful, light environment, you know, luscious greens and all positivity in a sense. And Orzeka was known as a kingdom, or rather a place engulfed in dark. It just didn't have sunlight in it. So this is kind of how you kind of probably get a little bit of Ganel Vidir vibes, you know, the light and the dark. It has something to it, although it's super not explored. So
yep.
Orzeka is a place where the first tribal men, known as quote-unquote perhaps the barbarians, appeared. And this Song of Tunta speaks about how, you know, the Thornwood Goddess will await the incoming civilizations, and she will guide them with her knowledge to bring forth the Orzekans into fruition. And Orzekans would find this Thornwood Goddess totally tangled in her thorns. And this is one of the most important and emblematic moments in Black Desert, because they would find the Thornwood Goddess and they would free her from her bounds, because she was indeed bound in thorns, which is something that we don't understand, considering the fact that, you know, Tunta essentially kind of found her and then all of a sudden she ended up in thorns. This is a little bit of a plot. We don't know how that happened, but the Thornwood Goddess would be freed, and in reply, in response to the Orzekans who freed her, she would become their goddess. And not just that, she will sprout for them a tree known as the Kuturan, the divine tree Kuturan, which is right now the centerpiece for the Ahiban mythos. It is everything that they worship in reality. It's always the Kuturan. The Dark Goddess and the Thornwood Goddess are kind of behind. It's still in practice though, but still into the future times it is such.
Is that the real name though?
Hey, we're gonna see at the end. We gotta see at the end. But you know, when we spoke earlier about Adoraxian, Orz is actually a Ganel, and she was found, presumably, as a war orphan, of course, before Adoraxian's creation, or around that, or at least for her biome alone. See, Orz is a Ganel, and that is a very profound thing, because this means that the elves were already here, which also builds up into the brand new piece of lore, which is about all of the races being submitted to the future Orzeka, right, before Orzeka. So now the very big question is, you know, okay, so we know about the Kuturan. It was sprouted for the Orzekans, and things would happen inside. They would worship this Thornwood Goddess, which also they would call the Dark Goddess as well, right? They mix both of those together. Nowadays, we kind of got hints, especially in Orzeka, that those two are separate entities, right? They're not even remotely close to the same. But we're not going to go into this up until the finale of the episode. So the creation of the Kururan tree and Orzeka's emergence into the world in particular. And let's do some important note to understand what happens here. See, Orzeka, as I mentioned, and Yolunakia are two right next to one another, presumably, at least this is how we picture it, and they are places of old. They're not precisely the Adoraxian biomes or the places of Adoraxian. The Adoraxian places are copies of those, is in the sense of preserving those places in knowledge, in aesthetics, and they're in an entirely different environment. So there is a very important thing happening, and this is a rule of power society. See, they are barbarians, and at this particular point, we kind of believe the dwarves were there, humans were there, probably giants, kind of the more tribal races, you could say it as such. And Orzeka would create a rule of power, and this rule of power would be absolute. Grim, have you played StarCraft? Or at least know StarCraft lore? Perhaps?
I know StarCraft, but I don't know the lore very well. You're probably referring to the Protoss, maybe.
Exactly, the Protoss. A side piece of the Protoss known as the Tal'Darim have a rule of power, which is always the strongest will always be in front. And they would consistently have battles between one another into going up the chain, right? So it's a very brutal environment. Yeah. And this is essentially how I personally interpret Orzeka, because it is always the strongest, the most exploitive. It is always the people that are the most ruthless, which are at the top. And the rules over there in Orzeka are basically survival of the fittest. It's a regime, and Orzeka, it's still Orzeka. Orzeka is essentially this rule of power, and a society is being born of pretty much desire for nothing but blood and conquer. And this is something that we gotta talk a little bit, because Orzeka, at least I do believe, and I'm not sure if I am going to spew a lie right now, but Orzeka's, grand ascension comes in particular with a king and a hex. And let's talk a little bit about the king and hex here. It's a popular trope for every king of an empire or every king of a kingdom to have a witch around him which would do his dark biddings. That's a popular trope.
Oracle wizard.
Yeah, Oracle Wizard, exactly. We all have this. And in Orzeka, which I think still is Orzeka, is going to be Belshuwan and Moa. See, Belshuwan is a king which is kind of known for his cunningness, for his desire to push the masses down. He doesn't want uprisings in a sense. He doesn't want people to, or at least I interpret it as such. He doesn't want people to go ahead and go throughout this vicious cycle necessarily. He kind of wants to create a new kingdom in a sense, for it to expand. And that doesn't happen whenever your entirety of the mythos is all about whoever gets to kill the guy above. It's like a vassal state in a sense, right? You kill the guy in front, you become closer and closer to the king, eventually you kill the king. That's not really a regime that works. So they do a thing. The Orzekians understand, at least at one point, I interpret it as such, that you cannot really continue going like this if you wish for this to stay. And they have to expand. And here is where the barbarians actually go through, and this is the point in which we believe, at the very least, that Orzeka begins its expansion, and the closest place is Yolunakia. This is where they start conquering first. Now, Yolunakia is a place believably filled with shies, with dwarves. It's kind of like a chill place. Think of it, the whimsical fairy. Yeah, it's the Shire, literally. It's the whimsical little thing which everybody is all around, and it's happiness. It's, at one point Yolu herself, who is named after Yolunakia, this is one of the architects of Adoraxian, she was sent there by Sage to collect all knowledge she possibly can. And Yolu in particular sees those as dirt baggy fools, and she knows, she speaks particularly of the diet of the Yolunakians, how they would dig trees' roots and they would eat it dirty and not washed up, and she would be a little bit disgruntled by it. And she expresses this as, for 2 days I have still the senses of mud in my mouth and stuff like that. So this is a little bit of that funny, but you get an idea. Yolunakia is a little bit of, the simplest people living the simplest life and enjoying it. And here comes Orzeca's expansion. This is a very important moment because we know for a fact that the townsfolk, or rather the people of Yolunakia, are known as the Oluns. This is very important and crucial. I know people are going to ask.
People might know that name, yeah.
Yeah, people might. Okay, wait, hold a minute. What do you mean Oluns? You mean the rocks? No, don't worry about it. That's a story for a little bit later. But yeah, the Oluns are in particular the denizens of that spot. And upon Orzeka essentially toppling with a snap of a finger Yolunakia, the regime continues to grow. And this is one of the interesting things about Orzeka's regime. From now on, it's no longer Orzeka. From now on, it is Orzeka. See, Orzeka is the merging between the two kingdoms. One of the kingdoms is going to entirely go over the other, and it's going to expand with such rapid state throughout the entirety of the world. And just to go a little bit ahead here in the story, this particular piece of knowledge that was dropped to us about a week ago says how big Orzeka was actually. And this is insane. We knew that it was big. We knew that, if you open up the map of Black Desert, what we knew was that Orzeka was almost at the outskirts of Calphion, but at the time Calphion was not a thing. It was definitely in Dragon. It perhaps went a little bit over Dragon, maybe a little bit of Serendia. It spanned all the way to Gyfenrisia. We know this for a fact. This is Orzeka. But little did we know that in reality the expansion continued all the way to conquer Serendia, Balanos, Calphion, Medea, all the way to Valencia, up until the Demon Lands. So this is the entirety of the world at this point.
So they're British.
Oh my god. They're British. They're Brits for sure, dude. All you guys need to do is just sprout a tree at this point and worship it, to be fair with you. But if you think about it, it's kind of a little bit like the Scandinavian conquests and the expansionism, because the Yggdrasil tree, and it kind of rings, it's kind of similar if you think about it.
See it.
Yeah, so the Orzecan Empire was huge, and it was toppled down in literally a day. Something happened and it snapped and it disappeared almost instantly. But we're going to go into right now how those kingdoms, of course, Orzeka and Yolunakia, merged. See, the king Belshuan and Moa, they were the ruling elite, and they were in a weird, some sort of a symbiotic relationships where one abused the other and the other vice versa for the sakes of power. And they would be like, it kind of feels to me like they were the two pillars. So you have the pillar of sorcery, the mysticism side, and then you have the brutality of the physical combat, which might have been Belshuan. But their relationships are entirely, it's not like, they're king and queen, just for the people wondering. At this particular point, a very important person comes into the lore by the name of Cantarnia. Cantarnia is known as the Grand Architect of the Orzecan Empire. She would see through the golden age of Orzeka herself. So she is an architect which is very, very knowledgeable and is capable of doing a lot of things, and we believe that the merge between Orzeka and Yolunakia was overseen by her because she constructed Adoraxian. The castle which is there is actually a remnant of Orzeka. It was not built by the Ahibs. They stumbled upon it, and look at that work if you think about it. Everywhere around Odilita, you see just rubble. There is very little to standing construction. It's all destroyed. And then you go into Adoraxian and it's standing still, right? It's like it's still there, barely moved. This is the experience of Cantarnia, just to build a little bit of credit to her. We will talk about her in a moment, though. See, remember when I told you about the Gyfenrisia and how it spans all the way towards Gyfenrisia? That's a civilization on its own over there. There's very little that we know of it, but the Gyfenrisia is essentially a bunch of people living over there in that periphery or whatever, something like the outskirts of the empire, at least probably at that point. We don't really know in particular. But see, the Orzecan regime and this worship this particular, Thornwood goddess, or how they call her, the dark goddess, not making any differentiation. See, a regime of power is a regime of power, and it needs to be fueled. In order for you to keep the masses entertained, as the Romans says, you need bread and entertainment. This is what they did. And in particular, what do you think might go wrong when you have a bloodthirsty kingdom, entirely going over expansionism? Well, they would definitely derive themselves into castes, right? Because the Orzecans are not looking forward to live in symbiosis with the Yolunakians. For Christ's sake, of course not. They're going to abuse the living crap out of them. They're going to use them as slaves, and as slaves, they use them. It's expected. Like, you don't really get anything out of that. But as they went into the Gyfenrisia, they had their own ideas. They decided, what would be very good for our expansionism prosperity? Let's do human sacrifices, because why hell not? Why not? Of course, I mean, it's the most sensical thing to do. And Belshuan and Moa, at the start, did this secretly, though. See, they didn't want to go throughout the masses and say, hey, it's your turn. No. The Orzecans were kind of all, at least I interpret it as such, they kind of knew what was going on. And you use fuel to go throughout the entirety of this conquesting, quote-unquote, process. And you needed fuel. You needed people to be kind of, okay, we're doing something here. So the Oluns would be, those little shies and those little children and the dwarves and the Gyfenrisia people. They would be essentially that cattle, and they would be seen as cattle. They would lock them in the caves. They would just keep them there up until their time came. They were completely disregarding of them. The only thing that they had worth in was their blood, and their blood was the only thing they had any interest in. Which is kind of, in my opinion, why, if you think about it, okay, how long up until you expand and the expansion implodes if you have this particular idea, right? Because think about it, there's only a little bit of Orzecans, and there's a lot of other races and civilizations, and how many of them will align to you before they go over you? So that was a little bit of an issue which they had to solve. See, the children of Gyfenrisia were used as slaves, and they would use as sacrifices to the dark goddess, the Thornwood goddess, so they call her. And the Orzecans would cherish those memories. They would go throughout those huge festivals as if to kind of create those sacrifices and parade those little kids. They were really sadistic. They were enjoying it. Up until something happened one day. See, Hexamoa was, sorry YouTube, but she was a bitch. Hexamoa was a bitch. She was a horrible, horrible bitch. And she was upset with one thing. You're Hex, the most powerful probably witch in the kingdom. By the way, for the people wondering, Hexamoa, Hexamary, probably the same, practitioner of power, probably something along these lines. Bear in mind, at this particular point, the black spirits have not been in this world, right? So we're kind of not aware of what precisely is going on still. This is a little bit before this. So one night in particular, all of those tucked away children for sacrifice, the Gyfenrisia kids, she was annoyed with them, man. She was like, those kids can't stop crying. I want my sacrifices to stop crying that they're going to lose their lives tomorrow. And, BDO being... As you do, of course. BDO being BDO. It's kind of like normal, shut up, kids. You're done anyways. So the process was the following. In her ingenious attempt, she was like, I want those kids to stop crying. So they went ahead and from the places of sacrifice, they shoved them in a cave and put a giant boulder in front of it. But you could still hear the cries. And, because that wasn't bad enough. They were already cold. They were like lifeless kids. They couldn't stop. And she was super annoyed by it. So she had to devise a trick, which was known as Hexamoa's trick. She went to that particular architect known as Cantarnia. And she was like, hey, Cantarnia, I'm looking to ease those children's suffering. I'm looking to just help them and provide them with everything that they could in order for just to have some pleasant moments. Because that's kind of nice. If you think about it, okay, you have a regime, you understand it, you have to provide for it, but at the very least make the final moments bearable, right? At least this is what we think would be happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously not going to be the case, but carry on.
Obviously not going to be the case. So she makes, those particular toys of brass and bronze, very important two colors. So those particular toys were given back to Hexamoa, and Cantarnia went about her business, being like, okay, here it is, I made those toys for you, small little toy soldiers, nothing out of the ordinary. So Hexamoa goes into the cave where the children were shoved, puts the boulder aside and throws them the toys, and they start playing with them. Little did we know that Hexamoa's trick is actually essentially her enchanting those toys to suck out the soul-like emotions of the kids. So there would be nothing but husks. And the only thing that you would hear inside the cave as they played would be the legs of the toy soldiers just gently tapping upon the ground as if drops of stalagmite water in a cave. That would be Hexamoa's entire idea of resolving this issue. So the children in particular, well, I guess you couldn't hear them anymore. But BDO being BDO, it can always go a lot worse, Grim, right? It can always go a lot worse. Of course, it always goes a lot worse.
Yeah,
in particular, we spoke about this guy, dude. We haven't mentioned him lately, but we gotta mention him right now because we believe this is the first time he showed his face in our world, in our reality. Ever heard of this guy, Hadum?
Oh, yeah.
This guy
He's got a certain influence, especially when despairs about.
Of course. And what do these kids feel right now? Of course they feel despair. Of course they feel despaired. You're gonna lose your life tomorrow, throat slit, and your king is gonna drink your blood and throw it to a goddess. Of course, why not? And the goddess, by the way, I am not sure what the hell is going on with this entire regime. So you're a goddess, you're a Thornwood goddess. We just introduced the Thornwood goddess earlier through the Song of Tuna as a girl that was crying and was bloodless. Right? That's a very interesting, very important thing. Bloodless. So wouldn't those sacrifices serve some purpose if you think about it? Okay, so you give blood to the bloodless goddess, right? Kind of something like this. Well, we'll see in a bit. But see, this guy, Hadum, yeah, he has servants at this point, or at least one very important servant, and his name is Ibidor, who is at that particular time known as the Serpent of Truth. Yeah, go figure. That's what they named.
Crazy.
So Ibidor is disguised himself. Like he is, they don't know of Hadum. Bear in mind, we believe, or at least I personally believe, that at no given point in time do we hear about Hadum up until now. So I think this is the very first encounter with our world and Hadum. This is post Elvia. Sylvia is here. We know the elves are around here. Everything is fine. Or rather not fine. But Ibidor is looking for ways to usher in his god because that's his sole purpose. This is Hadum's servants' only purpose, to usher in their god into the world which they're kind of here like parasites about. So he is looking for those little kids. And he's like, I sense so much despair here. Man, surely we can find people for sacrifice. Of course, you're in Orzeka. You're going to find plenty of them. It's literally what the kingdom's entirety lower structure is based upon. Call the weakest for sacrifice. That is what Orzeka is at this point, the empire. But see, Ibidor was like, he disguised himself. He got into the particular caves or the dungeons where they held the kids, and they saw those little husks. And he's like, well, that's not going to do. We need them to do something. We need to amplify it a little bit. So he took the children's toys away, and as he did, almost as if interpreted as if their senses came back to them, and he told them, children, do not despair as such. Sing of hope. Sing of hope. You need to sing of hope. You will be rebirthed if you sing through hope. And this is a little bit of that. Wait, hold on a minute. Why would Ibidor want hope? Why would that be a thing? That would be a little bit contradictory considering his god is of despair. Well, wow. How do you despair if you do not hope stolen away from you, right? That kind of is it. So those little kids, they begin, sing of hope. But see, because it's BDO and everything can always go, very, very dark, Black Desert decides that it's very appropriate at this point for the songs of the children, which, have already had their souls seeped into those weapons. All of those essentially was an incantation. Ibidor taught them how to incantate. And the Gyfenrisia toys, their little brass and bronze soldiers, they would grow in great stature and they would start attacking and they would kill everything in their way. Of course, everyone hears about this commotion, Hexamoa and Belchuan first of it, and they go throughout to check what happened. Ibidor at that time, of course, he already scoots out. That plan didn't work properly. And I might be mistaking something here, very important in particular. But the Song of Hope, it kind of feels like an incantation, because the little children souls kind of like went into the Gyfens and they started smashing things. It kind of feels like this. What is transpiring at this particular point is a bloodbath. Everything is dead. The kids are dead. The only survivors are very few, right? So Hexamoa and Belchuan hear of this commotion. They go into the dungeon. They go to see what's going on, and they hear about a serpent. A story is being told by a survivor that they hear about the serpent who told them to sing of hope, and hope is the only thing that serpent wanted. See, this is where you understand kind of the genius of Ibidor, because the Hex and Belchuan are kind of at this point super pissed, because they're okay, Thornwood Goddess, those were your sacrifices. Didn't you care for at least for a little bit to protect them, to kind of look into this entire thing, because you depend on these? So they kind of grow wary of a thing. That goddess might not be that strong, right? And, BDO being in a typical BDO fashion, it can always get a lot worse, Grim.
Of course.
It can always get a lot worse. See, this is how we believe at this particular point, at the very least, we believe was the expansionism of the empire over Yolunakia and going throughout the entirety of the world, because King Belchuan issues a decree which I think was in a knowledge known as the Cup of Oblivion. I think it was. I may be mistaken here, but the idea here is that he ushers in a decree throughout the entirety of now what is known as Orzeka, for nothing but despair to be ever practiced. All hope must be strangled away from the kingdom, and nothing but the darkness shall remain, so that despair can be the only thing that remains within the kingdom. This is like super smart, because how the hell did Ibidor go throughout all of this? We do not know. This is kind of the snake doing its work very well. Sing to hope to the kids, to scare the king and the Hex, so they plunge the kingdom into darkness. That's perfect. That's literally genius.
Perfect.
That's genius. So what they do is they issue up this decree. But of course, BDO can be very dark. And the Hex Grim, she's very upset with this. She is actually super upset. She doesn't like this. And she takes this important chalice known as the Cup of Oblivion, and what she does is she travels to the children's corpses of Gyfenrisia and she plucks their teeth. And what she does is she puts those teeth into the Cup of Oblivion and she starts shaking it around, and you could hear the clatter of bloody teeth freshly extracted from the corpses of those poor little kids for sacrifices that just got slain, by the way, by the magic of Ibidor. And she curses them to never find an afterlife, for them to stay into the abyss forever, because it's their fault for trusting Ibidor. This is the type of bitch that Hexamoa is, like just a horrid individual. So the decree is issued. Orzeka is a thing, and they still worship the Kuduran tree. They still go throughout despair. But see, the people, you can never really fully extinguish hope. Such times are hard, and the Orzecan Empire, as much as it continues going forward, dark practices are going through. Grim. Very dark practices. What I told you just now kind of pales to comparison to
Darker than sacrificing children?
Oh, it goes a lot darker, Grim. Have you ever heard of the Akidna Convent?
No, I haven't.
Well, Grim, the Akidna Convent is a way. Remember, let's go back on this. Remember earlier when I told you, okay, how long can an empire exist when only its core is allowed to be dominant? You're going to have all parts eventually push back on you. So this is something that they had to resolve. Something very, very important to resolve. How do you keep the high etiquette? Because, just to elaborate a little bit of that point, the Yoluns are not happy, or Oluns at this point not happy. Whatever races are above are not happy. At some point they're gonna revolt. So what they did was, okay, we need to create more Orzecans. Because why not? Or rather, not Orzecans. No, Orzecans must stay. We need to create armies to fight for us. The Akidna Convent is a sisterhood dedicated to the study of the Kuturan tree to create artificial human beings. Or at least we believe artificial races, whichever sprouts from that.
I remember this.
Yes. So the Akidna Convent is a sisterhood. They're nothing but priests fully devoted to the Kuturan and the Thornwood Goddess. And what they would do is they would find ways through the sap of the tree to conceive life. But see, the tree sap, it needed sacrifice. You need to sacrifice life. And at that particular point in time, it was well established that what they would tell those sacrifices would be, if you contribute to this, you will be reborn as tooth fairies if you're kids, or spirits into the future. This is what they told them. Now we know this to be a fact. We know for a fact that the sacrifices towards the Kuturan tree did indeed create tooth fairies. But the curse of Hexamoa kind of runs deep, because those children, they just wanted to live, and she just didn't allow them to. Didn't allow them even incarnation. They didn't even offer the blood. They just cursed them to stay forever there. So the Akidna Convent would find ways to create artificial humans known as the Homunculi, or I think they were called Onel in Elvish. I think in the future they would be called Onel, I think. So they would go throughout this, study it very carefully. But see, whenever you create artificial life, something is prone to, go sideways, right? Think about it. You are creating life, and something sprout out of that tree that looks like a mass of flesh. Grim, what do you think you can do with this mass of flesh? Think about it.
I mean, you can make anything.
That didn't sound good, man. What can you make out of a mass of flesh, Grim? Jesus Christ.
I mean, without spoilers, this does involve a certain class.
Oh, no. Unfortunately, it does, but this is, 6,000 probably years into the future, when someone else uncovers the Akidna Convent and repeats what they did. But now, well, Grim, it's BDO and it can always go darker. See, all of those little babies that would be brought and they would essentially called with defect, well, they would be stuck onto the tree's roots and be left to bleed as sacrifice. Yeah. Just onto the tree's roots. Stick them in. And do you know something, Grim? Because it's BDO, it can always go darker. See?
Of course.
The Kuturan bears fruits, Grim. Every once in a while. So we're
eating children blood fruit. Got it.
Hold on. They're doing this, but it's not them eating it. It's the children themselves. See, Grim, it's BDO, and it can always go darker. The tree can actually heal you. So all of those babies and all of those little creations and masses would be pretty much pierced through the roots, and they would be left there to bleed as batteries of return sacrifice to the tree. And to some of them, they would be given the Kuturan's fruits, which would heal them and keep them as perpetual batteries there to forever bleed and keep on contributing. Welcome to BDO lore.
It's not all shies and rainbows.
It's not all shies and rainbows. This is one of those particular moments that makes the Night Lords in 40k look like babies. Because just gonna go into 40k real quick. One of the worst things that the Night Lords have done is to flay babies alive and broadcast onto the voxes their screams to get the people to comply. And they would comply. But over here, that serves a purpose. This here serves a darker purpose, because one thing is finishing a life, another thing is preventing a life from being able to finish, right? That is just horrid in my eyes. So the Akidna Convent, yeah, fun times, peak peak times.
Yeah, amazing.
So it's very important to say that despite the fact that, there were times where things didn't work out, they did create an army. And this is how we believe Orzeca was capable of going through and finish this conquest of the world, because they would create those artificial human beings and they would serve one purpose, and that is expansionism. They just go through, fight the fight so Orzeca can continue and, enthrall the entirety of the races. So here's something very interesting, and I am not entirely sure if this was a part of the Akidna Convent. I'm not entirely sure if this was a part of the Kuturan or the future. But see, how they breathed lives into them was to cut pieces of the roots and lit them ablaze, smoke them, and inhale into the masses of life born into them so that they would go alive. So you sacrifice a little bit of the tree in order for you to create this. So yeah, basically what they're doing is they're basically substance abusing the tree. They would cut little bits of the roots and smoke them for the sake of it. And I'm not kidding.
How would they come to this conclusion, though? How would they be like, this is going to work?
I mean, when you're ancient times right now rediscovering things, I mean, I guess you have a lot of time in your hands. Some elf or some human or hex was like, you know what? Why not give it a go? Because that's how discoveries are made. Why not give it a go? So this is the Akidna Convent. We know this of Nova's lore, which is very important.
There it is.
We know this of Nova's lore. Now, we're not going to mention anything more on this outside of the fact that Orzeca is expanding. It's expanding like none other. See, this particular decree of King Belmorn and Hexamoa to plunge the world into darkness, eventually the people don't like it. And the Kuturan tree is not just a tree for sacrifices. See, Hexamoa would sustain herself out of those sacrifices. What if I told you the darkest thing about Orzeca is that probably nothing went to the tree, Grim. It all went to the goddamn hex. It's how she sustained.
It makes sense.
It's so crazy because we lack all types of evidence for the fact that the tree took sacrifices or the goddess took sacrifices. That's one of the weird things about it. There's very little knowledge about this. All we know is that the hex would use sacrifices for sustenance. But see, they kind of grow a little bit into that, okay, Thornwood Goddess, you're not cool anymore. We need something new. And Belmorn and Hexamoa secretly in the skies, they were like, okay, we need someone new, man. We need someone more darker, someone more powerful. We need a new god. And what did they decide to do? Okay, well, we have this divine tree Kuturan that is capable of bearing life. Why not freaking try and see if we can create a god? So what they did... Yep, because, you're just bored out of your mind. Why the hell not create a freaking god? So what they did, Grim, was... I failed to find the knowledge for it, and I hope somebody can find that for me. Or if I'm wrong about this, someone tell me, please, because I failed to find this. But there was a piece of knowledge, or was it a quest precisely, which says that 1,000 days of praying and sacrifices were offered to the tree. 1,000 days of praise and sacrifices were offered to the tree of Kuturan, from which a god... a benevolent god, not the malevolent, a benevolent god was born. And this god is Kazarka. Kazarka is born underneath the Kuturan tree. Our god Kazarka, who is named as the god of hope. Now, how the hell is Orzeca creating a god and it's not called the god of destruction and despair and depravity and everything else that you could possibly think? Well, see, hope can never be fully extinguished. Hope can never be fully extinguished because the people that went there for the prayer, they were hoping for a new god. The emotion which they went through, they were hoping for a new god. And this is one of those ironies in particular because they should have despaired for a malevolent god, which would bring Hadum forth. Hadum would have been like, I'm here, baby. What's going on? How you doing?
What's going on? Got any kids to sacrifice?
Got I think. Oh, Grim, I forgot to tell you. Do you know what happened with Ibidor? Ibidor was
there was spoiler thing.
No.
Okay.
I forgot about it. Belshuan was so upset with Ibidor's commotion and the Shadow Snake to the point where he issued another decree to kill every snake in the country.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, every snake in the country, like all the animals and everything. And this is a little bit comical, but also he did something very important. Hexamoa promised if anyone is ever to catch Ibidor and bring them to the Hexen King, they will get the Cup of Oblivion, and all they needed was proof of the skin of the white snake Ibidor. And that's something very interesting.
Okay.
Now that kind of never got into fruition, or at least I do not believe that ever got into fruition. Hexamoa's curse at this point of the kids happened, the 1,000 days of prayer of hope, and then Kazarka was birthed underneath the Kuturan. And of course the Orzekans are like, woohoo, new god, let's continue the sacrifices for the new god. You know, that's their regime. But see, Kazarka was something else, man. To understand the difference between our Kazarka, the Lord of Corruption, now as known, basically losing his mojo and dropping there, to the old Kazarka, Ibidor scooted out of Orzeka so fast, saying, baby, I got nothing more to do here. This is out of this world. These people are insane. When you have Hadum's top servant at this particular point, Ibidor, saying, I have no chance here to do anything for my god. I need to move over to somewhere else where I have a chance. You know you're dark. When you have created an entity which shoos away the Ibidor, potentially, at least we believe so, you know you did good. And Kazarka is a god of hope. And this becomes the golden age of Orzeka. 1,000 days of prayer for 1,000 years of prosperity for the Orzekans. And now everybody is like, well, what did Zarka do? Well, Zarka, what we have right now is a smithereen of what Zarka is. See, every time we summon Zarka in Surrender Shrine, it's a speck of him. You summon only what you have provided for the summon. In reality, Zarka is a little bit of like, if you offer me 1,000 days of prayers and sacrifice, you might summon something as strong as what I were back then. But when you have 4 cultists practicing and, slitting 5 throats, you only get a little bit of Zarka, which is also hard to kill. Now imagine the difference in terms of how much the Orzekans pour there, because it's 1,000 days of sacrifice and 1,000 prayers. Who knows? Perhaps the entirety of the empire was on this entire tree praying for a new god. And the hopes were repaid with Kazarka. A being so powerful that deterred Hadum's influence off of the world. Now, here's something that I have no idea of. We know that Orzeka had meddling with the black spirits at this point. We know this for a fact because what happens down the line with Orzeka, we know that they were living with black spirits. We know this. It's just that the black spirit part of Orzeka was never truly fully explored to some profound detail. But if you think about it, Kazarka being there, the black spirits would have probably been, okay, I'm gone a little bit, kind of, not necessarily, but I'm gonna go.
Yeah, would have been that kid doing the peace sign and vanishing.
True. no, dude, that was Ibidor. So, Kazarka is a god of hope, and he grants wishes. Actually, unconditionally grants wishes. He doesn't stop. Everyone that is deemed fit by the Orzecan elite to get a wish gets a wish, and you keep on doing it. But the thing is that he grants contradicting wishes. Now, Grim, what would the Orzekans possibly wish for? Go ahead, you have all the shots.
To sacrifice.
Okay, that's dark, but no recollection of this. See, what? Power, Grim. Speed and power, as Jeremy Clarkson says. See, dude, it's, when you have a regime and only the elites have an access to a god, in a sense, you tend to get, this other guy is in front of me. I really want to get his stature, but I gotta kill him. Hey, Zarka, can you do something about this? Boom, dead.
Can you smite this guy quick? Thanks.
Can you smite this guy quick? And Zarka would do it, and he would continue to do it. But the thing is, Zarka, you give him offerings. They gave him the finest wines. They gave him the finest things like bread, food. We don't know what Kazarka looked at this point, but we know why he looks like he looks right now. But still, we're going to get to that in a moment. See, Hexamoa is still alive, bro. Hexamoa's being chillin'. Hexamoa is continuing all of those sacrifices in quote-unquote the Swamp of Oblivion, which is now known as the Crypt of Resting Thoughts. So this is happening, it's still going, and apparently she's amassing power. And one of the things about Orzeka is that at no given point has ever been stated that Kazarka took any of the sacrifices. That's one of the things about it, is because
it's all been going to her.
All of it is going to her. She's been around to this point, and yeah, this is something that happens. So, of course, when you spawn a fresh god that repelled the darkest of evils from the world tends to hear about this. Specifically, a bunch of people from the Mountain of Eternal Winter, known as the Bahitrams. So, the Bahitrams are kind of like a tribal folk. They're kind of spiritual, very spiritual. Bear in mind, at this particular time, the dragons of lore are here. And there's very big suggestions that Orzeka never spanned to the Mountain of Eternal Winter because the dragons were there. Think about Libresca. Think about, at that point, Markthanen is there. Who knows where Banha is, if he's even relevant in the picture. But yeah, dragons are very big there. They pretty much are gods. They're seen as gods. So we know for a fact that if it expanded there, it probably had different relationships for sure. But seeing a very important person, which we're going to touch upon in bigger detail in the future, known as Silverfront, has fallen in love with a dragon known as Libresca. And he makes an entire episode of himself trying to earn this dragon's favor. And Libresca is something that we will not talk at all because we just don't want to spoil anything. But something very important comes out of Libresca known as the Phoenix Flame. And Silverfront, in his desperation to fall in love with a dragon, hears about an all-wish-giving god. Where the hell does he go? He goes to see Kazarka. And of course, they give him an audience with Kazarka. And this is something very, very important here because we have never heard of Kazarka asking anything, Grim. He never asks for favors. He just does because this is his purpose. His purpose was
He just gives, yeah.
He just gives. He literally just gives. But he asks this time for something. And he asks for something very powerful. A tool which is rumored to be able to kill gods. And he asks Silverfront to bring him back the Phoenix Flame. And this is something very, very important. Very, very important. So Silverfront leaves Orzeka with an idea. Okay, I need to get this Phoenix Flame, which is in possession of Libresca, by the way, and I need to bring it towards Kazarka so I can finally get this dragon to also fall in love with me. But see, the irony here is that this god known Kazarka wanting the Phoenix Flame, that probably won't end well. Remember earlier, Grim, when I told you that when you're too oppressive, eventually rebellions are gonna forge?
Yep.
Meet the Knights of Dawn, baby.
There they are.
Here they are. Literally the OGs of the ancient world. The Knights of Dawn are super cool, by the way. I really want more lore about them. They're so enigmatic because they are a secret organization forged by few with the idea to bring the world back to its normal state, because Orzeka is a taint upon reality, as if it is a regime so brutal to the point where it's going to eat the world alive, pretty much, in a sense. So as Silverfront goes back to the Mountain of Eternal Winter, which is at that point, it's not even Mountain of Eternal Winter called. It's called of being those crazy peak mountains of shining light and super tall. He goes to Libresca and tells her about his feelings and everything, and Libresca gives him the Phoenix Flame. And as he departs away from Mountain of Eternal Winter is when it becomes Mountain of Eternal Winter, for Libresca is kind of essentially giving him something that he doesn't know. The Phoenix Flame is her heart in reality. So the metaphor here is, I gave you my heart. I love you in a sense. But Silverfront, being the dumbass that he is, and this is a theory, by the way, we don't know if the Phoenix Flame is in factually her heart, but yeah, it kind of looks like it, dude. So Libreska gives his heart, and he goes towards Orzeka. And on his ways, whether or not on the way to Mountain of Eternal Winter or afterwards, he stumbles upon the Knights of Dawn with Bahit Lalekona, who is literally one of the most important lore characters in Black Desert, especially for the purpose of Mountain of Eternal Winter. He is iconic there. Like, he is the top dog of that zone. So Bahit Lalekona and Silverfront with the Knights of Dawn, they have some conversations. It's like, do you understand what is going on in the world? This is kind of theory. We don't know what they ever said to one another, but this is just theories. The Knights of Dawn, they have a conversation with him. Look at what Orzeka is doing to the world. A world which depends on its existence of a god. Like, the Orzekans go stale at that point. Think about it. We have nothing here, dude. Literally nothing. It is all about a god giving us all of our wishes. We no longer even need to expand. In fact, a theory of how it expanded so much was probably Zarka's influence. Because, hey, we want to conquer this particular king over there. We want to kill him so we get the kingdom. And Zarka probably snaps his finger and does it. This is the omnipotence of Zarka at this point. And they're like, we have a thing rumored to be able to kill gods. If we are to be free and make our choices, this is the time. The Knights of Dawn are formed, Bahit Lalekona is with them, and Silverfront, and they go to Orzeka with the sinister purpose to kill a god whose only purpose to exist is to protect, in reality. So they get to the Temple of Zarka, and Silverfront gets inside. And Zarka talks to him and says, Silverfront, show me Yinix. This is what he said, show me Yinix. And he shows the Yinix. And at that particular point, the Knights of Dawn come through. And they use the power of the Yinix flame to kill Zarka and set the temple ablaze. And the temple collapses over Kazarka. And this is Orzeka is toppled within a day. This is that particular moment, because with Zarka being at the forefront and probably 99.9% of Orzeka's power, now Orzeka is powerless because the god of hope is dead, and they kill him in reality. See, they don't stop here now. See, Hexamoa, they know of this contraption of hers. They know what she did. It's time for vengeance. So as much as I would like to say that vengeance was disposed, it wasn't, unfortunately. For whatever reasons, we do not know, Hexamoa was just taken and locked in a tower, like a princess, pretty much Disney type stuff. We don't know why they did it. They just locked her in a tower, and plot twist, never to be heard of again. But something happened. Something happened very importantly, Grim. See, Zarka all of a sudden emerges with his scorched body and malformed features, with literal pieces of rock scorched and bound to his skin. And he is enraged, beyond enraged. Zarka ransack the entirety of Orzeka for God knows how much. He destroys the kingdom which he built himself, which is so freaking cool, by the way. I'll have you know.
That's crazy.
Because think about it. You spawned me to do your bidding and you killed me for it. That is Orzeka. That is so Orzeka. If you think about it, that is so exploitive. And my interpretation of this entire story was that Zarka brought forth Toppling Orzeka in spite and hatred, because they corrupt him through their wishes. The idea of Zarka going from the god of hope to god of corruption was because the corruption of heart was what they put in him. Instead of giving him his hope, they gave him his corruption. So he's a battery that takes. So he became basically this. So a very important thing right now is to talk about what happens with Zarka's death, because the Knights of Dawn assist again, and we believe that sometime in the future Zarka is in fact being slain or sealed off. Whenever you're having a god which influence is so engraved into the fabrics of our reality, Zarka's blood and the death of Zarka taints all of the lands in which he had influence. taints them so deep to the point where corruption, specifically in Odilita, is synonymous with Odilita. He becomes almost as if his essence is so deep into the ground to the point where everything that spawns from there, everything that just, all sprite is a creature of Zarka, as if. And this is very important for the future plot, because Zarka not only does this, but he corrupts, in a sense, the Kuturan, because his blood is engraved within the fabrics and the soil of Odilita. Who knows how much time passes? A particular figure is now king of Orzeka, and Orzeka is probably no longer an empire. Whatever it is left of is dwindling. You know, Zarka did a number on it, the Knights of Dawn did a number on it, and Axion is that particular name of the king. Nova players right now are rejoicing. Oh, it's our boy, it's our boy. Indeed it is. So Axion is known at the time as the King of the Dead, which is a very ironic name in my opinion, considering the Dead Empire and stuff like that. Probably something like this.
There's a lot of dead.
A lot of dead. And he is known as the last king of Orzeka. See, we forgot about a god, Grim, didn't we? Which god did we forgot about? The Thornwood Goddess. Where? Yep. We forgot about her, and so did the Orzekans. I'm telling this story, by the way, very clever, because you forgot about it. Everybody forgot about the Thornwood Goddess, and now you remember her. Now, what would a dwindling kingdom that depends on godhood powers in order for it to sustain itself and survive do when the god was slain? You know, there's a song, go back to your very first love, it's never gonna disappoint, and that's what they did. A song is, there's a song about the Dark Goddess, and she sung this to them in particular. And it's a song about, if you ever stray away from your path, children, come back to me with this song, and you will find again your purpose, something along these lines. I'm misinterpreting it. But see, they were super kind of, you know, Orzeka is like whatever at this point. It's depressive. This probably is about 600 years ago, maybe 7, maybe up to 1,000. You get the idea. So what I'm telling you, the story is like spanning great amounts of millennia. So a very important thing right now to understand, Grim, is that Axion is King Belshuan and Hexamoa times 2. Yeah, the dude doesn't. No. The dude doesn't just kill the kids and everything. He paints with their blood, drinks it, and wears their corpses as if fetishes, as if he would delve into necromancy to resurrect almost. This is kind of like, they call him the King of the Dead for a reason, right? We believe that this is kind of like the first time necromancy becomes a thing. And he is almost as if he's so powerful to the point where nobody can challenge the rule, in a sense. And the rule of power is still a rule of power. So something happens here in particular. See, at that particular time, the Oluns are still being used as you know, those unfortunate beings to be sacrificed to the deeds of the Orzecan kings, whichever deeds may be. And the Oluns are so desperate to this point. They're tired of this existence, of this cycle of their own people constantly being sacrificed, to the point where they look for prayer into the Kuturan. And they sit and they pray for salvation. They pray for immortality, in a sense, so that they cannot really go into this. And this is a little bit theory land, but ever since that day, they fell asleep, and they wake up every once in a while, only when they are disturbed. The Olun's rocks are probably those people, because the Kuturan, or the Thornwood Goddess, turned them into beings that could withstand the time, in such a delicious irony. So delicious. So that's kind of heavy. That's more heavy to me personally, because it shows that no god is good, dude. It's like, be careful what you wish for gods probably misinterpret what you need.
So we're smashing people that were turned into rocks.
We're smashing people that were turned to the rocks. Also, speaking about this, remember what I told you about those toy brass soldiers? Well, Belshuan and Hexamoa send those toy soldiers to Gif and Rissia. It's the towers and the flamens and destroyers. It's the ones we kill. Yeah. And we think that failing to find salvation in the afterlife is because their souls return back to the flamens and the destroyers and the crushers and everything. right? Yeah. So it's that cycle. It's like you constantly kill the souls of kids there. That's kind of the theory around now. So moving into the new times,
just usual,
just
BDO
usual
stuff.
things, usual, just
yeah, love the BDO.
No depression here at all. Just good vibes. So, Axion King of the Dead is the current king, unchallenged. He does horrible things, twice over what Moa and Belshuan did. And the people are tired, dude. The people are tired. They cannot go for this. So the Orzecans, they go back to the Thornwood goddess looking for their salvation. And this is, honestly, hands down my favorite moment in the entirety of Black Desert. I don't think there is a better moment in BDO lore than this one right here. The Thornwood goddess accepts them. And they ask for their salvation, and she gives them a thorn of the Kuturan. She gives them a sting. And you know what she does? You will be the instrument of your own salvation. Correct what you have done. So the people get a divine weapon, and they go and they kill Axion. Orzeka is officially gone. This is... It brings me chill every time. Every time I think about it, it gives me chills.
It's very poetic.
It's very poetic. It is so well written, and this is my opinion. As I said earlier, this is one of the most beautiful moments of BDO lore, is to see how Pearl Abyss craft through knowledge entries and questing, how they craft this entire mythos. And in the end, it's like the goddess gave us our own salvation, which was our demise. The Orzecans are gone, because their last king was slain with the help of the goddess. But also, it's a double-edged sword, because the Thornwood goddess would be forgotten again. Imagine if a god which depends on you to exist tells you to cease to exist. How much you actually fucked up. That is also poetic here. You can interpret this into so many other different ways. But yeah, Orzeka topples. But see, because this is BDO lore, Grim.
It can always get worse.
It can always get worse. See, there was an individual, man. There was a very individual who was, quote unquote, living off of the scraps of the streets in the final days of Orzeka. That individual would, after the finale of the Empire, would take over. And he would lead people towards the northern regions of the world, after Orzeka's toppling. And he would set up a kingdom himself. And that kingdom would be known as the Hexa Kingdom. And that individual that would go about and bring this kingdom forward would be known as Belmorn.
Oh, yes.
And not just that, Grim, they would reconquer the world once more. Now, Belmorn reconquering the world is definitely by no stretch of the imagination even remotely close to what the Orzecans did, because, yeah, Belmorn was still a Kazarka worshipper. And from then on, Belmorn is an episode of his own, because we're jumping in literally recent times, kind of. But Belmorn would reconquer pretty much all the way, kind of at least, we believe, from Calphion all the way near to Ulukita. Who knows when precisely, how precisely that spanned, who was a part of it. At that particular time, it's kind of the Sorks start to emerge with their practices and symbiosis with the Black Spirit. They have, in my opinion, I think sorceresses have the best relationships with their Black Spirit because it's so understood between them. But that is also a Sork episode onto the side. So, the irony of Orzeka, from start to finish, brought its own destruction by corrupting a god, the hubris and greed of man. But see, Orzeka survived, Grim. It survived. In its final moment, the people of Orzeka poured all of their malice into a piece of gear so that whatever could survive out of the menace which Orzeka is, would. And that piece of gear is known as La Orzeka, the outfit. This is the last remnant of Orzeka. So, we covered it, and Orzeka is so big and important for video lore because everything kind of in our world from here on starts. Because I just introduced everything to you. Think about it. I just introduced you Northern of Calphion, the Hex Kingdom, and Belmorn. We just spoke about the origin of Zarka, which is literally the most meaningful thing in our lore, especially recently. We spoke about a little bit about the Sorks. We spoke about Ulukita. The elves were here. The Black Spirit's already here. From here on forward, it is modern lore. Pretty much from now on, it's modern lore. So,
is there any more child sacrifices or?
Some, some. Because I mean, when you're a descendant of Orzeka, surely you follow suit. Come on, he wouldn't disappoint.
Yeah.
He wouldn't disappoint, but he would do. Belmorn is actually cool. He's actually cool because of how vicious he is. But he is a thinker in a sense. He is, yeah. We're going to talk about Belmorn into the future. But thank you so much, everyone, for watching. This is a little bit of an extended episode because Orzeka is kind of very big. And remember, Orzeka lore grows every single month. Like, PA just provide more and more depth to it. I might have gotten some things wrong, some, particular moments not precisely up to date and stuff like that, but you get the overall idea of Orzeka. It is super extensive, and also to know Orzeka is to know the full lore of BDO, because every place tells of Orzeka lore. But Grim, how do you feel, man? Creepy stuff, eh?
Ooh, I've got some questions if we have time.
Of course, let's go.
Okay, so the heart of Belmorn's kingdom, where exactly is it?
Underneath in the Hex Sanctuary is where we believe it's kind of south of Calphion. We think where Hexmary is because there's like structures there, kind of like old things looking alike, places where
like churches and stuff, right?
Yeah. It kind of looks like this. And also remember, this is recent-ish because that's probably, I don't know, 400 years ago. So it's better than 8,000 or 6,000. You could
Does that explain all these skellies and everything?
Well, the hexes, they grew their influence and everything like that. But yeah, there is a heavy connection with Hex Sanctuary and Hex Kingdom. After all, the kingdom was kind of there. Now, Hex Kingdom is not well explored. In fact, it's barely explored. We're not sure, or at least I am not sure, where Calphion gets into this entire thing. It's probably very, very recent in comparison. But yeah.
Okay. And we don't know what happened to Hexamoa.
We don't know what happened with Hexamoa, but here's the thing. The Ahibs of modern days have a theory. See, when you go grind in Crypt of Resting Thoughts, probably you yourself have seen and other people have seen, there's this boss that spawns known as Raznal. The Ahibs theorize, based on the Orzecan entries, that this is the reincarnation of Hexamoa. However, I don't bite into this theory because they themselves don't bite into this theory. And they explicitly say, we kind of think that is true. Okay, but you're not very convincing now. You're not very convincing. So
speculation.
What happened with Hexamoa, we do not know, Grim. But I have a theory. See, Kazarka somehow got alive after being slain and toppled Orzeka. This is nowhere explored. Or we do not know if this was precisely after or whatever happened. But something happened, and Hexamoa was never heard of it. Surely Hexamoa wouldn't be this stupid to keep that power for herself. What if she was the person to resurrect Zarka? What if that happened?
It takes a lot to resurrect a god, so...
And she's been piling on God knows how many years of sacrifices and power. She probably could have, at the very least, gave him a nudge so that he could somehow get back. But it's a theory. We do not know. But also, this goes into the future theory is, okay, if you know that Zarka's soul is infused with someone else's power, why would this one particular person look forward to stealing Zarka's soul? Why not just kill him so he never comes back? This is what Elezra did. This is what Elezra did. She stole the soul of Zarka. And this is my theory. Not that Elezra is necessarily Hexamoa. Oh, that would be super cool, by the way.
Oh, God, that would be crazy.
That would be super crazy. But however, it kind of lets us know that, someone was aware of this. And right now, considering what Elezra says to Orz, hey, Orz, you weren't like this when you were little. And if Orz is worshipping the Dark Goddess, aka the Thornwood Goddess, and if that leads back to Orzeka, perhaps someone oversaw this entire thing happening. Someone knows a lot here, dude. And the Elezra theories soon, Gladios, TM, hopefully, we don't know. And we'll see what happens later. But yeah, that would be super crazy if Elezra is actually Hexamoa.
How does Hexamary play into this?
Oh, Hexamary is future stuff, recent stuff. We're going to talk about her in the Calpheon episode, essentially. You could kind of make a case that probably hexes are descendants of that place. Probably you could even make the case that sorks are descendants of that place. You could make that as a claim, probably with perfect utility. Frankly, we don't know what magic they practice, because Hexamoa never does anything outside of cursing the kids and essentially us knowing that she's stockpiled. We don't know what they look like. However, Grim, in the Gladios, I have seen the fight, and Elezra uses dark red magic. So it's like, dude, dude, you know, it's like so obvious at this point, man. It's so fucking cool. It's so cool. It's so cool.
If she is Hexamoa, that'd be crazy.
That would be so good if she is Hexamoa, but probably not, because I don't think PA are capable of making something this good, frankly. But that would have been the plot twist of the century, and it would go full circle into so many things. But everyone, please make sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Share this with all of your friends, because we are looking to grow Grim. And also the Discord. Please get in there. Get in there. You can ask questions. We'll answer happily if you have anything. Let's just build this into community so we can all enjoy BDO. Because frankly, Grim, I think that drama farming and negativism in BDO is right now at the forefront. And I don't like this.
Oh,
I want
cringe.
I want to love BDO and share the love with BDO. This is what I want to do.
Yeah, exactly. We got IRL Orzekians.
We got IRL Orzeka. Come on, you went hard there, man. I think. All right, let's say our goodbyes, because we are reaching for more than what we should. See you guys. Bye bye.
See ya.